Hello everybody, it's me, I'm back from my holiday. I was expecting to have like a proper good talk about my holiday, and I was like, oh, I'll make this whatever it is bonus video, and I'll say, oh, what do you want me to talk about? But let's be honest, I'll be spending a good while talking about my holiday. Right now I don't feel inclined to do that. I will say three things. One, I still haven't got my haircut. I am getting my haircut tomorrow. There we go. So that's your information, which should mean by the time the video goes up on Wednesday, I'm kind of planning on recording that a little bit late. Usually I try and record them in advance, but I'm like, whatever. So yeah, I should have a haircut by then. In fact, I'll probably be recording the video with a fresh haircut, which sometimes doesn't look great. Like it takes a while for the hair to settle. But let's be honest, we're not in this for my dashing good looks. Two, you'll notice the microphone is in a new place. I didn't acknowledge this for a while now. I've realized that if I do any slight movement that hits my desk, I mean, if I wobble this, well, I don't know if you can notice actually. I feel like it's not wobbling as much as I would have thought it would. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I usually have that right over there, that's why. Oh god, everything's screwed up. There we go. Yeah, my desk wobbles, and I used to have my microphone attached to the desk with the microphone arm. But I also have a bookshelf next to I have a bookshelf not just here, but another bookshelf there, which is not quite as full of books. But yes, I have a bookshelf next to my desk, and that is much more sturdy, so I've attached a microphone to that. It's not a bad arrangement. The only issue is I have to tuck it right out of the way or else I bang my head on it. Obviously, when it was over here, I guess you can tell from this wall here, I don't have any cause to walk in that direction. But obviously, this is the way I go out. I go out that way, directly into my microphone, so I have to really move out of the way. And if I just slightly tuck it out of the way, like it's a little bit up, a little bit out of the way, I'm liable to bang my head on it, so I have to go like, right up against the bookcase. Anyway, final thing is, I got a comment from someone saying, oh, you shouldn't, like, for God's sake, man, stop doing autofocus. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, should this be a bit closer? Stop doing autofocus on your camera. And I was like, okay, fine, I will, random person. The issue is, I don't know if they tell you this, once you turn off autofocus, you then have to learn how manual focus works. No one told me that part. So I don't know whether or not that works. What I will say is I've been aware for a while. There are things that I wish I could do with this camera. Probably the biggest one is that the light, it automatically adjusts depending on how much light is in the thing, and like that annoys me because obviously, so the biggest example I noticed of it, and this is related to me being on holiday in Italy, is that one of the things we were doing is going to loads of churches, and I wanted to just film the church, show how pretty it looked. And whenever there would be some light from the window, like whenever I would be scanning and I would get some window in, suddenly everything else would become insanely dark. And then like other times, for example, I'd be trying to film the window, but it was trying to light for the wall. So then the window was insanely bright. And I was like, really, I wish I had control so I could just decide, this is the thing that I'm trying to film here. So adjust the brightness for this thing. Because otherwise what I have to do is kind of zoom in until whatever it is I'm trying to film takes up the whole screen, I guess. Frame, that's the word I'm looking for. And that's not necessarily the effect I'm trying to achieve. So honestly, like I wish they had, like when I got my camera, I feel like it's a Canon camera, should just have tutorials online that basically go through for each individual camera. Here's every single thing, because I was trying to find some stuff about how it all works and things, but I was finding it for DSLRs. I'm not fancy enough to own a DSLR. I was like, well, I can watch this, but I don't know whether or not it's necessarily going to apply, because I think the whole point of a DSLR is that it has even more fancy functions. But I'd like to know what the functions are, what exactly I should be doing. I did discover. So I'm not going to lie, I actually kind of forgot what white balance was. I thought that white balance was just how bright do things appear. That's not what it is. White balance is how white the things appear, which is slightly different. And I actually realized I can change the white balance on these recordings to make them seem slightly warmer than they are, for example. I don't know if there's anything else I need to say. Well, is that three things? Microphone, haircut, camera fixing. Yeah, so basically if the camera's not good. I mean, right now I'm like, is it still going out of focus? I should be in focus. But if I'm not, then that sucks. Maybe it's... Oop. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how it works. I need to learn how my camera works. If anyone wants to tell me, I'll tell you what my exact camera is. It's a SX740HS. That's my thing. So if anyone finds out where there's a tutorial that, again, just like, I was going to say like left to right, which doesn't really make sense, but kind of like if you've got like a menu of options, you kind of just work your way through them. That's what I'd be interested in. Like it literally says, you know, this is the first thing you could do. I'm like, oh, you know, I might be interested in doing that. Because yeah, right now it's all a bit, what's the word? Overwhelming. That's it. Anyway, yeah, I don't think I do need to talk about my trip to Italy. It was fun. I suppose the one thing I'll say, just in case you're wondering, in case you're thinking, you know, in giving on Patreon, am I just throwing away money, living lavishly? It was a very good deal. The trip, it was reasonably fancy, but it was, I don't know, shall I be very direct? I think I worked out, all told, for both me and my wife, it came to, I think, just over £1,000 for both of us, for 6 nights. So I would say that's reasonable. And that's transport, that's all the food we had, everything like that. I think my brain's telling me that's just about reasonable, you know, overall. I've never really got a baseline. I will say that when I went to Canada, that was incredibly expensive and I hated it and I regret going for as long as I did. I could complain about Canada. Anyway, but yeah, Italy was nice. People were surprisingly not very friendly. I feel like there's a stereotype that Italians and Southern Europeans in general are very friendly, whereas, for example, French people aren't very friendly. In my experience, it's the exact opposite. When we were in France, every single person we met who was French was really nice, really friendly, really accommodating, just willing to help you out. There was a point where we just didn't have any money, and I went into a shop and I was like, hey, you know, is there a way that I can, like, you know, buy something with my card, but then you just kind of give me the money? Like, but then they were just like, oh no, just have the money. Like, you know, you don't need to buy anything. We'll just give you the money for free that you need to take the bus. Yeah, I don't think that would have happened in Italy. In fact, literally, there was one moment where, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it was a really simple problem that the guy I was talking to could have solved. It was like when we were trying to ride a cable car, as it happens. And the guy literally said, that's your problem, not my problem. Sorry, I'm making him sound like Russian. That's your problem, not my problem. There we go, that's my brilliant Italian. But yeah, literally was like, that's your problem, not my problem. And it's like, dude, like, you know, come on, you know, be a bit friendly. Like, I'm a tourist. I haven't even bothered to learn. No, I actually tried to learn to speak Italian. It's just impossible because, like, literally my current knowledge of Italian is, like, I could complain about Duolingo. That's another thing. I have completed the Duolingo Italian course. There's no more of it to do for me, except for, like, the refreshers and whatever. But the actual, like, course that you progress, course 1, course 2, course 3, I've completed it on Duolingo. I don't feel like I speak any Italian. So as far as I'm concerned, like, that's it. You know, if you wanted a reason to think that Duolingo is a load of crap, there's Exhibit A. I literally have completed the entire Italian course, and I don't really feel like I speak any Italian. I could vaguely... I mean, I kind of discovered that I spoke Italian well enough to get myself stuck in conversations with people who didn't realize that I didn't actually speak Italian. It was like a moment where I was like... the thing is, like, I thought my terrible grammar would be enough to get away. I was like trying to talk to a woman. I was like, trying to explain, because I was walking into the pool area of the hotel when it was just about to close, and I wanted to explain, I'm not here to swim. I'm just here to look around so I can find out for tomorrow. So I was like, explorare e guardare, no nuotare. Nuotare domani, which I think, is it domani or mattina? Mattina's the morning. I think domani's tomorrow. I also feel like, doesn't it mean Sunday though? Or just, I don't know, whatever. At the time, see, for all, I don't even know if I said the right word, but essentially, I guess what I said there, like from my perspective, I think what I said was to explore and to look, not to swim. To swim tomorrow. That's what I tried to say, which I would think, like, the fact I said it in that way would make it obvious I don't actually speak Italian. She then just started speaking just straight up Italian to me. I feel like a lot of Europeans are very bad at dealing, like, considering you think they interact with a lot of people who don't speak that language, they're very bad at it. And by which I mean very bad at speaking to people who don't speak that language. Because I was a bus guy, and this time I didn't even make any attempt to speak Italian. And essentially what he wanted to tell me was that there is a place by the bus stop where you have to bite it, was just another, oh my god, like, okay, I need people to understand this. In the UK, every single bus has, you know, like a restaurant or a taxi, like this very cheap piece of technology that almost everyone has now, where they can just hold out something and you tap it with your card, your like debit card or whatever, and you pay for the thing. Like something that even the smallest business has, you know, like I say, taxis have it. It's clearly something that's very readily portable. You know, you can go to some just completely out of the way, cute little cafe. They'll have a way that you can just pay for something with your card. Yeah, this shouldn't be surprising. It should be obvious. But in the UK, that is how the buses work. You can just get on the bus and say, oh, you know, I would like to go to this place. And they say, okay, you know, the fare to get to that place is £1.50 or whatever. And then you get out your debit card and you just tap to pay by contactless, the same way that nowadays people pay for all sorts of things. For some reason, I am yet to go to any other country where that is the system, where that is a possibility. Every other country has some bizarre, confusing thing. So in Canada and France, it was basically you had to pay with cash. You could only pay with cash for your ticket. And you had to pay with exact cash because they didn't have, you know, what's it called? Change. Or I think maybe sometimes they had change. You couldn't rely on them having change. So you just had to walk around with a whole load of coins in your pocket on the off chance you were going to get the bus. In Italy, though, it was even more bizarre. In Italy, you have to actually go to a ticket machine that hopefully you're at a bus stop that's, you know, sophisticated enough to have a ticket machine. That fortunately, we actually got like a kind of tourist card for where we were that covered a lot of the attractions. So that was very good value for money. And covered the buses, so we just had to show them our pass. And I feel like maybe that's the thing, that there's this growing tendency for buses to be specifically for people who have bus passes, and the idea that somebody would just get on the bus on a kind of a whim isn't really accounted for, even though for me that's what a bus should be for. The point of a bus is that you can just say, oh, I need to go to space, I'll just get on the bus, oh, here's a bus stop. You know, even like for my attitude, sometimes I've wanted to get on a bus just to progress slightly further down a road. There was one time in Canada where it was a big, long, straight road, and I had to walk down a straight road, and I was at a bus stop, and I was like, honestly, I feel like I could just wait for the bus here and just get on the bus and just take it like 1 or 2 stops down the road, like kind of just ask the guy, which would be nice because there wouldn't be a language barrier, you know, how many stops is this bus going down this straight road? Because I just want to go as far down this straight road as you'll take me. But in the end, I gave up because the bus was taking a while. I had no way of checking how long it was going to be. And I was like, to be honest, it's probably going to get, because at this point I'd already had enough experiences with non-English, savage countries, sorry, I should say non-British, savage, barbaric countries where they don't have this basic system of just paying, you know, with a debit card. I was like, I'm probably going to get on. They're like, oh no, you have to get this special pass, bus ticket thing, whatever. I was like, screw that. So I gave up and I just decided to continue walking on my way. And I think later on found out that indeed there would have been some kind of stupid bus system. That's the worst thing about being outside of the UK. And one of the best things about the UK, I mean, there's so many great things about the UK, but one of them, comfortably, is the fact that our bus, I think what makes it so great is just that it's such an obvious way it should be. Right? Like, it's not that it's some genius, fantastic thing. It's just, why the hell, considering, like I say, it's not as if this contactless payment technology where you just pay with your debit card is an irregularity. It's not as if it's something you don't see all the time, so I can't understand why buses wouldn't have it. Again, it's absurd. In the UK, it's so simple. You just get on a bus, maybe you're in town, maybe you're planning on walking, but your legs are a bit tired, you just go to the bus stop. You don't have to have cash on you all the time because that's annoying. You just, get on the bus, boom, easy peasy. In Europe, no, not simple. I mean, bear in mind also, if you're on holiday, you will have bought a limited amount of cash with you anyway because you had to convert it into a particular currency. So you've got to kind of think, how much cash do I have? How much cash should I bring with me? It's a stupid system. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to talk about Italy. I have. All right. But yeah, the upshot is basically just the... Oh, yeah, sorry, I was saying, so this guy, he couldn't explain this. I just realized where this little... what's the word, tangent started. Essentially, this guy wanted to explain to me on the bus, you have to go to this special place to get the tickets. And the easiest way he could have explained that is just to say, we're a really, really stupid country that doesn't know how buses are supposed to work because we're morons. But instead what he said was, bibbidi babbidi bobbidi babbidi bobbidi babbidi bobbidi. And I would think, if I was confronted with someone who I knew didn't speak English, I would speak very slowly, very deliberately, and use only a few keywords, hoping, because for example, if he would have just said, macchina biglietera, which I think means like machine ticket, something like that, or whatever, essentially just the two, because I know what a ticket is. It's like a billet, and I think actually a place that a ticket stand is called a biglietera. So honestly, if he would have just said the word biglietera, that would have been fine. I would have been okay. But instead, because he said several words very quickly, he probably did say the word biglietera, but I couldn't hear that when it was surrounded by all sorts of other words, which I don't know what he was saying. He was probably saying some needlessly long sentence, what you have to do is you have to go out there and then you have to find this ticket machine, and then once you're at the ticket machine, you have to... And it's dude, just point in the direction of the thing and just use a key word to make it obvious. And yeah, I would hope that if I met somebody who, maybe they didn't speak, maybe they spoke some English. I'd hope everyone speaks at least some English considering the nature of the world. But I don't expect everyone coming to the UK, if they're from a foreign country that speaks a different language, to know it perfectly. If a French person walked up to me, they seemed kind of confused, and I knew what the solution was. I would use very clear hand gestures as much as I could, and use the minimum number of key words to make it clear what I was talking about. And it's surprising to me that so many Europeans, or just in general, people who don't speak English, I feel in my head, I genuinely feel English people, despite the fact that we famously don't speak as many languages, we're not as likely to be bilingual as people who aren't native English speakers. I have a strong feeling that English people are actually better at conversing with people who don't speak, because it's like the meme about English people is that we just talk louder and slower, when we're talking to someone who doesn't speak English. It's excuse me, where is the bar? But I don't understand if you can make fun of that, because clearly that is the proper way to talk. That's how I would prefer somebody spoke to me. If I didn't speak Italian, I'd rather an Italian person spoke very loudly and slowly to me in Italian, because there is a much greater chance, therefore, because you can kind of work out Italian a lot of the time, especially if you speak at least a little bit of another language as well. Or if you just know some basic English words, and you can kind of be I can see how for example, there was something that was nasciendo, something like that, and I was I can work out, because we have the word nascent in English, which means newborn, that's to do with something being born. I could work that out just from context clues. So I don't know, I feel that's an underappreciated aspect of language, especially if you're talking about Indo-European languages where there's going to be some connection. You can work it out. All right, let's actually jump into the video. So you guys voted for, I knew I was going to talk about this for a while. I knew there was no way. I'm sorry, I really hope you weren't this guy's going to come back from trekking all over the deep, dark land of Italy, and just not tell us about all of his adventures. I just hope that you were prepared for what just happened there, because I don't think I'm going to cut it down that much in post. I don't know how I feel about my microphone being here. I'm really worried that every single time I look away, it suddenly becomes very quiet. So you guys voted for me to respond to this YouTube channel, Carefree Wandering. I've been aware of this channel for a while, And I've been interested, but I've never really watched it because essentially what this guy does is he's made some videos disputing Philosophy Tube and pointing out that a lot of Philosophy Tube's pop philosophy crap isn't that accurate. And the thing is, I think there's lots of channels like that. Unfortunately, it seems to be the case on YouTube that popular channels tend to be very rubbish and simplify a lot of complicated topics. And as such, there is a viable YouTube strategy is to be the one who points out all the inaccurate things they say, and that's what this guy seems to do. I've never watched any of his videos because I already knew that Philosophy Tube was like wrong, that Philosophy Tube just said inaccurate stuff. Oh god, I'm just remembering that there's one video by Philosophy Tube about liberalism that is really dumb. Like, there's a really stupid point in it where, like, as far as I can, essentially the way I could explain it is Philosophy Tube basically says that liberalism means having slavery. So that's just to say that the idea that someone can point out that Philosophy Tube is wrong about loads of stuff isn't that interesting to me, even though, yeah, I'm sure this is a perfectly entertaining channel. But yeah, this also means, by the way, it's 2 times in a row that you guys are asking me to respond to channels that already kind of agree with me, right? Because last few weeks we've been responding to Andrew Gold, who of course is kind of on the broad gender critical side. And this person, I don't know if they're exactly gender critical, but they're clearly critical of a lot of trans content creators. So yeah, it would seem this person agrees with me. So it'll be interesting to see how much I actually have to say here. It might be the case that the rant actually helps this video get up to a normal time, because it's possible I'll be sat here just agreeing with it without much to say. Anyway, we will jump in now and see how much progress we make. Rant over.
It's intelligent, eloquently scripted. The presenter has a philosophy.
See, avoiding gendered or sex pronouns, I'd say. I must be honest, I still do not like the word gender, because it's always like, if you use the word gendered, you're implying, it's all very confusing. But then if you say sex pronouns, it's like, well, clearly they're not necessarily sex pronouns, right? Because when Philosophy Tube identifies as she, that's not a sex pronoun. So yeah, there's no great, which is why I always find myself having to use for the sake of being clear, I have to use the very clumsy categories of man or woman or whatever, like stuff like that, which always annoys me. Anyway, but yeah, avoiding those terms, which is very kind of relatable.
And transgender and gender issues are central to many of her videos. And most.
Okay, he said her.
I'm interested in something like a philosophy of identity, and I'm trying to work toward an existentialism of the 21st century.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that was a fancy way of saying it, but I felt like it's kind of in agreement with me, where it's like, to me, the big question is, when you say a biological male can be a woman, what are you saying? What does that mean? And how do you justify that belief? Which is a really simple, I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. I don't know why, recently I've been thinking about the YouTube channel Alex O'Connor. If you don't know who that is, it's fine, but there's a YouTube channel called Alex O'Connor. And he one of the reasons I've been thinking about him is because he was on Andrew Gold. And he's one of those people who I think is able to be quite reasonable about a lot of points. And I do have a lot of respect for him intellectually. And I've always thought to myself, if I was talking to someone like that, what would I want to say to them to get them to understand the gender critical position? I was thinking the first thing I would absolutely want to stress before anything else is, this is about a claim is being made about reality. Is that claim true? Do we have a good reason to believe that claim? Because at that point, it's just, I was thinking, one of the things that I would make a point of stressing is, if I wanted to start a conversation about the trans issue, I'd say, all right, let's start with this thing. Language changes all the time. Words change all the time. And that is a very strong point in favor of the gender critical position. Now, obviously, the point there is to kind of maybe confuse people a bit, because they might say, well, hold on a minute, I thought the gender critical position was that language isn't allowed to change, that woman always has to mean a biological female, that we have to use pronouns certain ways. But it's like, well, no, that's not the case. Instead, actually, if you look at the gender critical position and you start with the idea that language can change, you actually see why the gender critical position makes sense. Because, okay, let's say language can change all the time, but whenever language has changed, there's always been a reason for it. So the obvious example would be Pluto used to be considered a planet. Now it's not. Language changed. Planet no longer includes Pluto. But any scientist who knows anything about that topic can easily give you, even a kind of layperson, can give you a pretty basic explanation for why Pluto is no longer considered a planet. The most kind of accomplished, renowned, popular, I mean, ContraPoints kind of included, trans activists, trans ideologues who advocate for this claim that a woman should be changed to include biological males, they can't give you an explanation for why the term woman should include biological males. So, like, actually, if you start with the position of, okay, language changes all the time, language is always open to be changed, we should always be thinking, are we using these words in the proper way that makes the most sense, and change language accordingly, that's actually a big point in favor of rejecting trans identity, because that is not coherent with using language the way that makes the most sense, the way that we have arguments for it to be used. So yeah, for me, just in general, a big part of it is putting an emphasis on the fact, if you are advocating for trans identity, the first thing you need to do is give an argument for why biological males can be considered women.
Am I really, truly a woman, ontologically, neurologically, metaphysically? Well, honestly, I don't even know what that would mean.
There is no essence to gender.
I mean, look, there's already an issue here, which is that the term woman is being assumed to be a gendered category, which, again, you have to clarify what you mean by that, because, you know, some people do use the term gender to literally just mean the categories of man and woman, in which case, well, that's kind of tautological. But alternatively, of course, gender means femininity, masculinity, these roles and expectations, in which case, well, of course, there's no sense in which you can be a woman in that way, because that's not what being a woman is. Like, essentially, all you're saying there is that you're not defining yourself by sexist stereotypes, which is kind of funny because that is simultaneously the one thing that you are actually, let's be honest, doing.
Eternal male or female. And attempts to define gender beyond...
Sorry, my camera just ran out of recording space, literally as, or like reset recording, literally as he said something, which again, this is a problem. He, you know, like I said, I agree with this guy, maybe not so much, because he just conflated male and female with being a woman. So it's like, he's gone from gender to the categories of man and woman to male and female. This is exactly the kind of thing that Philosophy Tube has done. This is, like, so many times they do this, right? And it often, I say they, in this case, you know, I don't think this guy's like as much of a crazy pro-trans ideologue as other people, but still, like, this is the kind of thing. Obviously, we recently had the Jon Stewart video I responded to, where the guy literally said that being a man or woman is completely detached from gender. And it's like, well, hold a minute, that's the opposite to what you're saying. Whereas then he conflated man and woman with male and female. So it's like, oh, so it sounds like this guy is actually gender critical. But no, it's not this guy's gender critical. It's just that this guy uses these categories in ways that are kind of all over the place and conflating them. And This is it's not only kind of makes you seem sort of unintelligent, but it's also basically gender essentialism to be talking about gender and allowing that to be related to metaphysics and stuff like that, and then to conflate that with male and female. And at that point, you're implying there's some kind of metaphysics, like you're basically saying there's like a female soul.
Some bullshit semantic debate about what is a real woman.
It's not a bullshit. I don't get it. Like, how is that a bullshit semantic debate? It's just, it's such a lack of intellectual curiosity, because, you know, like, Pluto being a planet, that mattered. The fact it wasn't, that mattered. The fact we can use words, again, like, literally every single... You understanding what I'm saying right now is contingent on the words I'm saying having meaning. So you can't just say that an interest in what words mean is some bullshit semantic debate.
Then gender is not sacrosanct. It's neither of divine origin, nor is it an unalienable value. It's, in practice, contingent and negotiable. In this
I don't understand, because the thing is, the big issue here is he's using the word gender, and it's still not clear what he means when he says gender. But essentially, it seems like his argument there was very stupid, and I could have responded to a lot of that, but pretty much it was ContraPoints saying there is no metaphysics of gender, And also, there is no, like, gender doesn't come from theology, like, gender doesn't come from God. And also, gender isn't something that you're directly born with. And therefore, gender is negotiable and completely up to interpretation. Now, taking gender there to mean the categorizations of man and woman, that is dumb. First of all, like, if there is a God, then that God would be the author of truth. So in that it is true that men are men and women are women, that is something that comes from God. Like, so really the question there is just, do you believe in a God? Which is obviously a kind of irrelevant question. But the point is, like, that theology thing, like, that doesn't really matter. Like, is there a theology of man and woman? Well, yes, if there's a God, but no if there's not. Because really what you're saying there is there a theology of God? To which the answer is obviously yes. But that's not really important. The whole thing about, oh, you're not born a man or woman, you're born a baby, which is what Contra said, which I probably won't include that clip because whatever, but sure, but then you grow up into being, so you are born a boy or a girl, but we don't use the term man or woman to describe children, so then you become a man or woman based on whether you are a boy or a girl. So it seems like that's just wrong. So then when he says therefore, it's kind of negotiable, it's up to you, it's, you know, something which can vary or whatever. That one, I don't think is necessarily a valid conclusion just because it's not something you're born as, and it's not something that comes from God, and it's not some like metaphysical thing. That doesn't mean that therefore it must be negotiable. Like, there's other things it could be other than that. There are plenty of things which don't come from God, or, you know, don't have to be perceived as coming from God, don't have to be things you're born with, don't have to be metaphysical, and yet they're still true, and there's no way around the fact they're true. And secondly, his premises were false in the first place. You can't say that gender isn't something you're born with, because again, if you're defining gender as the categories of man or woman, which seems to be what he's doing, well, that is something you're born into on the assumption that you will mature to adulthood. So it just seems all very wrong.
That I don't think that there's a true self to begin with. Now here's a second fundamental agreement with ContraPoints. Chromosomal sex is biologically conditioned.
I'm going to pause. I'm pausing in the middle of that, but I'm thinking about like the true self thing. I think one thing that bothers me is that people talk about the whole transgender thing. If you're going to do that, you have to lay down. I had a comment recently. You know, I'm going to find the comment. Okay, real quick. This was on my video, Trans Activists Can't Define Women, and yes, that matters. Okay. It's actually quite a funny comment. Oh no, I give that a like. We can't define woman until a man wants to be one. No, okay, here's the comment. All right, ready? This is from someone called Hume Spoon. All I get from the comment section is that people haven't read a lick of nominalist metaphysics. So then I reply, what a stupid comment. What proportion of literally any comment section would you expect to have a larger number of people who've read any metaphysics? Pretty obvious you're just trying to sound smart by appealing to esoteric academic knowledge because you don't have actual arguments. Like, that's the thing. It's a really stupid thing to say, right? Like it's just a way of being like, oh, you know, you haven't read... I think it's very stupid for anyone to make a point about the fact that the majority of people haven't read a particular discipline. Because I would argue the way that knowledge should be disseminated is that if you have read some really fancy smart thing about like metaphysics or whatever, then okay, that's awesome. Your job is then to educate other people about that. Not just go, well, you haven't read that, because that's stupid. Like if there was like a comment section of like people who were kind of, let's say, creationists, and there was like a really complicated point about evolution they didn't understand. You know, like some South African web toad. I made that up. But like, let's say, like that's the thing. And then someone replied like, oh, clearly someone hasn't read the 1975 treatise by John Blom Blinglow about the South African web toad, genophilo type, so blah blah blah. Like, and they were like saying like, oh, clearly these people are a bunch of idiots. They haven't read this thing. And it's like, yeah, they haven't. So why don't you explain it to them? Like, explain the logic. And that's the thing. Like, that's what's so stupid about this comment, right? Like, if there is some worthwhile knowledge that can be gained from having read a lick of nominalist metaphysics explain what it is. It's just so stupid. Like, and you could apply it to literally anything. Like, if you're like a Christian and there's some atheists, and you guys are, so clearly these people haven't read a lick of Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. Okay, maybe they have, maybe they haven't, probably haven't. If you've read it, okay, what's the relevant part of the Summa Theologica? And explain it. Like, and I can understand someone saying, well, there's too much. You need to like understand, like things in a broader sense. Okay, that's fine. But at that point, like, don't even like comment the thing, or like maybe say, like, let's say for example, if a Christian was responding to a bunch of atheists, they might say, oh, this is actually quite a complicated issue, but you have to have like read the entire Bible first. So you just say like, look, you guys actually need to read the whole Bible in order to understand this point, and then maybe like explain the point anyway. So you guys, you need to read the whole Bible to understand this, but blah 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 blah, and then give like a rough outline. Like, that's the thing, just to say, oh, anyway. So then this person responds, LMAO, I'm the stupid one. I didn't say they were stupid. I just said that their comment was stupid. That is rich, Sparkles. You don't even clearly understand what I'm saying. I mean, I clearly do. I never said I was any bit surprised by this. Who goes on thinking this is common knowledge? You interpreted that into your point to make it seem like it was more damning than it actually was. So nice try there. Brackets, not really. I can be more than unsurprised and still be pretty dissatisfied with the level of knowledge people have regarding a relevant subject. Here's the thing, okay? If you're complaining about something, that implies you're surprised by it. I'm not saying that you were shocked. I'm saying like, to point out something as if it's of note is to point it out as if it's not to be 100% expected. Like, it's pretty, like, I'm sorry, but this guy, or, woman, whatever, I don't know, in saying, like, oh, it's pretty clear people who haven't read nominalist metaphysics. It's like, okay, the point is that's obvious, right? So I'm not necessarily saying, oh, oh, are you really surprised by that? No, but the point is, it's just such an obvious thing, okay? I'm clearly evoking more of the latter here. In my mind, and for further clarification, people don't get a pass because they fall into some large group of ignoramuses. Oh my god. What a twat. Sadly, and this goes with pretty much all sides of debate, people will act all too confident over points they do not understand in a thoroughgoing and evocative manner. So yeah, of course I'm going to be unhappy over intellectual grandiosity. I think I just like skim read this the first time. I didn't realize how embarrassing it is. Oh my goodness me. Goodness great. I was going to say God, then I said good instead of God, and then I realized I had to turn into goodness gracious. Into some large pool of ignoramuses. Again, because, like, look, yeah, it's really stupid because in order, I know I shouldn't even respond to this because it's so dumb, but the idea that people aren't allowed to talk about something until they've read, and we're talking about like a really basic thing here, like the word man or woman, words that people use all the time, words that factor into people's life in a massive way. The idea that you can't understand that until you've read some nominalist metaphysics, it's so stupid. And by the way, like, hanging over all this is like, I guarantee that this guy does not have an argument. Like, that's the thing. And I guess the thing is kind of to go back to why I was originally thinking about this. I feel like a lot of people, like when they say things like, oh, I don't think there's any such thing as the true self, they say these like big philosophical ideas, but I'm 100% sure the reason they do it is so that the largeness of the idea, the grandness of the idea, means that it obscures the fact they're not actually saying anything, right? So if you say, oh, you need to understand nominalist metaphysics, like, well, that sounds pretty smart, I guess like maybe there's something I'm missing or something like that. Or so you say like, oh, why do you believe this thing? Oh, nominalist metaphysics. Okay, just because it's a big thing, just because it takes you a while to say, doesn't mean it's an actual argument. It's just, yeah. Anyway, and then and that's funny that you're using the term obvious, but you are artificially extrapolating from mere text, something that can be quite difficult to interpret at times. And also someone you just met today, or so I know of, I don't believe I've interacted with you on other posts. And what do you mean I don't have actual arguments? Survey your comment section, dude. I've been here for some time now, on and off, once I get notifications. But here's a more interesting question. Do you think someone appealing to nominalism automatically makes you intelligent? I don't think so. It's not that complex once people give it an earnest shot. So I was just like so bored of that. So I replied like, what is your argument for the claim a biological male can be a woman, right? Because that's what matters. He's saying, oh, nominalism, metaphysical nominalism, blah, blah, blah. Okay, look, I don't care. If you think your metaphysical nominalism means that a biological male can be a woman, what's your argument for that? And then they reply like, first of all, why are you ignoring everything I said here? You're jumping into a new point without any clarification whatsoever. Second, why are you foisting arguments onto me without surveying my actual thoughts? I don't have a particular answer, since I don't believe the concept is truth apt, or at least I haven't seen a good reason for why it is. To push into the point further, what's a biological male to you? I know it's something you've gone into plenty of times, but state it out clearly so we can have a more accordant conversation regarding it. That way, all the chips are in plain viewing. Here's the thing, right? I feel like something people need to understand is that I'm not a twat. Basically, there are some people. There's a friend I have who, he kind of in jest. I'm not offended by it. I don't hate him because of it, but he accuses me of using big words unnecessarily, and I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, don't think I do. I don't think that I carry myself with any particular pomposity whatsoever. I really don't, and I hope I don't, because I don't imagine I do. I would generally say, I try to be smart, but I try to be smart in a way where, if anything, I'm acting like I'm dumb. Like, I try to, and that's why I'll often try to be like, I don't understand this, blah, blah, blah. Even just saying things like blah, 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 and stuff like that. To me, it's really not important that I'm perceived as talking in a smart sounding way. And yeah, contrary to my friend's joke, I actually don't think his assessment of me, like he's got a joke about like, oh, if I'm like wondering about whether or not to have cheese on toast for lunch, or like, a grilled cheese sandwich, I'll like go into some big thing about the metaphysics of cheese and toast and blah blah blah. And I get it, it's a joke, obviously, like it's an exaggeration. And I'm not super offended and bitter about it, I promise. But yeah, I'm just like, I don't really think I'm like that, to be honest. I feel like I'm usually someone who tries to keep everything pretty down to earth. And I say that because you compare it to someone like this, who's just clearly like trying to make them sound, what's the phrase? High off their own farts, I believe is the technical term. Trying to make themselves sound so smart. But it's like, I think like a really important thing to understand is that somebody who has very little, if perhaps no, like formal or even casual education in philosophy or anything like that, could run rings around this guy by just saying, yeah, but what's your argument for that a biological male could be a woman? Like, I do think, I'm not a complete like anti-intellectual. I think like sometimes, it might be worth, I think it's useful, for example, that I can, for example, like one of the most useful, I kind of want to make a video about this, because I think it's probably the most useful esoteric philosophical idea I appeal to is the distinction between epistemology and ontology. So anyone who's like heard me talk about the whole like trans issue at all has probably heard me like mention that. Basically the distinction between like, how do we know something's the case versus whether there is something to be known? That's like a really important distinction, because somebody might say, well, if you can't always know that a biological male isn't a woman, therefore you can't say they're not a woman. It's like, well, no, that's not how it works. There's plenty of things that I might not be able to know always whether they're the case, but I can still know that there is something to be known. So like that's a really important distinction. And that is like something where I'd be like, well, it's worth knowing that for basic reasons of kind of understanding and explaining reality as it is. But I would kind of tend to say that is the exception, that most of the time, if you're using, usually you can explain everything that needs to be explained without really having to engage in any complicated philosophical ideas, and when possible you should. Because the issue is, if you try to insert unnecessarily complicated philosophical ideas into something, then you are just being a pompous twat.
And there are, broadly speaking, from a chromosomal perspective, only two sexes, male and female.
Well, from a chromosomal perspective, no. There are more than two chromosomes.
So when transphobes say sex is real, they're not actually contradicting anything most trans people believe.
We can simply quote.
The issue is when we say sex is real, we're not just itemizing sex down to chromosomal versus genital. No, we're saying sex is a holistic thing.
Babies are not born essentially male or female. They are born with either male or female chromosomal sex.
What's the distinction? He's going to have to explain why it is that if you are born male or female in terms of your sex, that doesn't mean you're not, like, that just seems very dumb to me. It's like saying babies aren't born human. They're born with human genetics. It's like, what's the difference?
When de Beauvoir famously claimed that one is not...
I've already spoken about this before so many times. If you haven't seen me speak about this before, then you're not even a true fan, so I'm just going to ignore it in this context.
There's no correct gender role that corresponds exactly to a person's biology. And there are multiple ways of feeling, for instance, male or female.
Yeah, there's the right way, which is that you're actually male or female, and the wrong way of you're not male or female and you're just deluded. Those are indeed two different ways, so there are multiple ways of feeling it.
This is somewhat comparable to what we could call age identity. Age identity, too, is dissonant and incongruent.
Okay, see, I would point out that, like all analogies, that's really not going to work out in trans identity's favor, but okay. He says it's incongruent and dissonant. Let's see if he actually is able to explain how age identity is comparable to trans identity.
I never feel really identical with my age.
What does that mean? I mean, okay, fine, yeah. I don't either. But the point is, what you're really getting at there is that the truth of your age isn't how you feel. The truth of your age is how old you are. Just like the truth of whether you're a man or woman isn't how you feel. It's whether you're a man or woman. Like, it's kind of, I mean, I guess in that sense you could say, yeah, it's comparable to everything. Like, it's comparable to height, right? The truth of how tall I am is not how tall I feel, it's how tall I am if you actually measure me. Yeah, it is comparable, but comparable in that what ultimately matters is what's actually the case.
There's no perfect match between one's sex, one's gender roles, and how one feels about one's gender. The relation between sex and gender is...
There's no perfect match between one's sex, one's gender roles, okay, so those are two very, very different things being conflated there, and how one feels about one's gender. Yeah, obviously. This is another issue with like the way trans ideologues argue for their case. They say things that are the most obvious things in the world as if they're profound, right? Like, they'll say it like, there is no perfect match between one's sex and one's gender roles and how one feels about them. It's like, yeah, obviously. What an insanely obviously correct thing to say. What is the point in that? Like that's the issue, and it's basically just filler. It's a way of making themselves sound smart and profound when they're talking nonsense by just saying something that nobody could possibly disagree with, but as if they're saying something insightful, when everyone's like, if you actually think about what's being said there, nothing's really being said, and no one would disagree with it. Of course, we know people have gender roles and they feel like people can feel negative about their gender roles. That's like the whole point of feminism, right? That women had these gender roles and they weren't very fond of them, so they were like, oh, let's give this a miss. And as for biological sex, that's a little bit less obviously the case, but still, I mean, we know that trans-identified people exist. Like, obviously, even I don't think that trans identity is accurate, but I don't deny that trans-identified people clearly feel negative feelings about the reality of their biological sex. But even, I mean, you don't have to talk about trans identity. There are plenty of women who feel ill at ease with the reality of their, biological female body because of, maybe an association, maybe it makes them feel weak, makes them feel vulnerable. Maybe it's just that they've, there's certain aspects of their body that they, don't like because of, kind of the needling of the beauty industry. It's a very obvious point, and it does absolutely nothing to substantiate an argument for trans identity.
And of course, historically and socially, what it means to be a man or woman also changes big time. Now, gender identity is not identical. Chromosomes thoughts, and social gender are not
Okay, wait, pause, sorry. Sometimes I let him talk too long and I realized he said something stupid. He said, the categories of man and woman, or what it means to be a man and woman, have changed historically. It's very similar to what I covered in the Jon Stewart thing. The problem with this is that when you say that because society has thought of this way differently, that means in actual fact what this thing has meant has changed. You are literally endorsing, tacitly, implicitly, the dehumanization of various ethnic groups throughout history. This is what Lily Alexandra did before, claiming like, oh, you know, what it means to be a human has changed historically. People used to think that black people in the US South, or Jews, or whatever, were not human beings. Okay, here's a fun little fact there. Those people were wrong. What it means to be a human being has not changed historically. In the 1800s, antebellum US South, I don't think it's actually true, but let's say nobody thought that a black person was a human, except for, I guess the white people, or rather, I guess the black people themselves thought they were human. So let's just say that as an analogy. I don't know if that's really an accurate way of saying it, but let's say literally, if you asked a white person in 1800s US South, is a black person a human being? They would say, no, they're not. Okay, fun fact. In the 1800s, in the US South, the word human didn't mean something different than it does now. It didn't change. It wasn't flexible. The black people were still humans. The people who thought they weren't were wrong. 1940s, Germany. If you walked up to somebody in charge there and said, are Jews human? They might well have said no. Does that mean that the word human was flexible? Does it mean it was open to change? No. It means those people were wrong. Jews were still humans in the 1940s in Germany. And when you say that historically what it meant to be a woman, the literal definition of the term woman has changed, what you're saying is because society viewed women differently at different points in history in different places, therefore what it means to be a woman has changed. And if you're going to follow that logic there, then you are setting up a situation where you would also say, well, because people thought human beings, some groups weren't human beings in the past, that means what it actually meant to be a human being was different back then. No, what it meant to be a woman has always been the same throughout time. It's just that sometimes certain cultures have been wrong about that. That's really all it is. The same way certain cultures have been wrong about all sorts of things.
People identify as and are identified as in terms of gender. And that is very important.
In what context, right? Like, you could say that literally about anything. You could say people are identified in terms of religion. Yeah, sure, if we're talking about religion. People are identified in terms of social class. Yeah, absolutely, if we're talking about social class. Are people identified in terms of gender all the time? No. Are people identified in terms of gender when we're talking about the categories of man and woman? They may be, but if so, that is misogynistic. That is contrary to the values that we should have in a society. I think, by the way, I mentioned the lighting early on, changing the brightness manually. It's making me look a lot more pale now, but maybe I'm okay with that. Maybe it makes me look fairer. Anyway, it's not a logical thing to say, or rather, it's correct. But again, it's so many things that have been said. Like, I'm making decent progress, but that's because I'm ignoring a lot of moments where things are just said that are true but meaningless. Like, that's what a lot of this video has been.
Everybody must be gendered. Now, as viewers of this channel will maybe...
That's like a Bob Dylan reference. I'm trying to think what it is. It's like that. Everybody must get stoned. Or is it must be stoned? I suppose that would make sense because he didn't say get. Yeah, that's so I would not be so all alone. That's a good song. I mean, it's fine. It's probably not Bob Dylan's. It's not close to his best song, to be honest. But it's a fine one.
This is then typically also tied to a morality, to certain gendered values. Like honor is perceived as a commitment to gender roles. To just give
honor is perceived as commitment. I don't know. Look, this guy, so right now he's just talking about like how there's different gender roles and people perform different gender roles in order to make themselves be registered as male or female. And the answer is, well, yes, that is the case. It shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be looking into the roles people are performing as a way we determine that they're male or female, or rather men or women. But like, that is how it is. I wouldn't disagree with that. I would just say, should that be the case? And he hasn't really said anything, relating to that.
Hijras are socially very low. They are typically born males, and the community...
Yeah, I mean, basically he's talking about like the whole third gender thing, and he's pointing out the obvious, that these are actually really reactionary, oppressive categorizations, and not something to be celebrated as examples of diversity. Which is, again, in general, this is like one of the problems. I mean, it relates to the whole, thinking certain people aren't even human beings thing. Trans activists have a ridiculous habit of celebrating diversity, even if it means diverse ideas that are actually evil, right? So obviously they'll say, a human being can mean all sorts of things. People used to not think black people were humans. And it's like they say that as if it's like, isn't this an interesting example of diversity? And I mean, similar here, basically, these gender categories, which are actually quite oppressive, and like he says, these were the lowest people, or are the lowest people in the society in which they live. But again, it's celebrated as an example. Oh, look at this diversity. Look at these categorizations that exist in India. Yeah, categorizations for like regarding people as the lowest of the low in society. That's not something to be celebrated. So yeah, that's just, I think, a ridiculous thing trans activists do. Anyway, so we've got about 20 minutes left. We're going to finish now. I think I managed to make this pretty long with my rambling at the beginning, but we should comfortably finish this. In fact, I'm going to make a point of finishing this next week, which is good. We need to have a few videos that we get through in like just one viewing session. This was never going to be that. I don't think we were ever going to clear 35 minutes. I'm actually surprised at how much we did clear, considering how much time I spent talking about other stuff. But yeah, all right. I'll see you all later. Thanks for being here. Thanks for bearing with me while I was on holiday. I'll see you all next week. Bye.